And so now that we understand evolution and the driving forces of evolution and the premises behind evolution, we need to look at it more genetically because it's really the genetics that supports the theory of evolution. And Darwin's theory, albeit very well accepted, didn't gain wide, uh, you know, uh, as wide credibility as it had until it was paired with Mendel's work. So Mendel's work was give or take around the same time, but it actually went kind of undiscovered, um, and it wasn't really until people really saw the the, the importance of Mendel's work that it actually kind of filled in some of the missing pieces of Darwin's theory. And even more so when Watson and Crick came out with their understanding of DNA, it even furthermore verified Darwin's theory and how things change and how they could change. Because really, that's what Darwin lacked is the genetic explanation as to why traits were handed down from one generation to generation. Why would, for instance, a better fit individual probably have offspring that have better fit traits? A lot of that is explained in genetics. All right. So basically, the understanding of genes and DNA is the missing pieces of Darwin's theory and really proves why there is variety in a population. All right. Which, by definition, is a group of members of the same species. All right. So put all these together, and it is in its own way a little love story that kind of all support one another um, and give credibility to each of each other's theories and each of each other's works. So think about it. Why does variation exist genetically? Look at this little cluster of bees, and we see different patterns, different sizes, big wings, small wings, um, and then obviously probably some can smell better, see better. Those things obviously matter as well. If you look in the flowers, you have tall ones, short ones, different colors, wider flowers, some that are blossoming in the daylight, some that aren't quite yet. All that is variety. Look at these sharks. You have longer ones, thicker ones. You have probably faster ones. You have different color patterns. And even this little pack of hyenas, you see different color patterns. Bigger ones, stronger ones, perhaps smarter ones, faster ones. There is variety. Or even in this horrible group of people, you see variety exist in them as well. Uh, some of the reasons being that first and foremost, genotypes can be homozygous and heterozygous. That explains a limited amount of variety. And then truly that most traits are polygenic and that most traits are due to not just a single gene with perhaps two varieties, but are due to multiple genes with much, much more variety. Excuse me. Multiple alleles. So, for instance, the fact that some genes actually have not just two alleles, but sometimes multiple, or even things like incomplete dominance, where the dominant doesn't totally mask the recessive, or codominance, where, like our blood type, you have two different traits at the same time. Mutations explain why new traits show up in between generations. Mutations being both favorable and unfavorable, and genetic shuffling, as we see in crossing over, and how genes can actually be shuffled and mixed in between generations as well. All of which explains why variety exists even within a family. So what we're going to look at, and really consider here is what's called the gene pool, which is a hypothetical, but the gene pool is all the genes and alleles in a population. So this little picture I found online would show you, for instance, that you have, a lot of dominant alleles in this population, albeit there are some recessive alleles. And what we're looking at is what's called the relative frequency, which is how often certain alleles appear in a gene pool compared to others. Um, and basically, what evolution is, genetically speaking, is if you see a change in the relative frequency of an allele, meaning that, for instance, if allele becomes more common or less common, then that means evolution is occurring, even on a small scale. So if we go back to our little peppered moth study, if you will, all right? So again, this is all hypothetical, but let's say initially, let's say big H is dark and little h is light. You see a lot more little h's. Albeit, yeah, there's some dark moths, but most of them are light. So if we were to graph this, all right, we would have a higher frequency of light moths and a lower frequency of dark moths, or even more so, a higher frequency of the light allele and a lower frequency of the dark allele. So let's say changes occur. So we move generations into the future and we look at a new gene pool. All right, now if you kind of rewind with me, if you will, there it is. A lot of little h's, homozygous recessives. All right, and if we change that, we see them replaced by a lot more big H's, a lot more of those dark alleles. So what we see if we were to regraph a little sound effect there for you, is all of a sudden the light allele is now less common and the dark allele is more common. Now they're still moths. They're not a new species of moth, but they are changing. That is evolution, and it's in this case it is actually caused by natural selection.